Welcome to Generous Impact. This is Bret Brummitt.
And this is Amanda Brummitt. We are joined today by Lisa Sugarman. Lisa is a survivor of suicide loss, a crisis counselor with the Trevor Project, storyteller with National Alliance on Mental Illness, a safe place survivors of suicide loss, grief group facilitator with Samaritans, and a mental health advocate. In this episode, you'll hear how she's on a mission to help end the stigma surrounding suicide and mental illness by normalizing conversations about mental health, suicide, grief, and loss. Lisa, thank you so much for being here with us today. If you could start with just telling us who you are personally and professionally.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you both for having me. These are the conversations that I want to have most, so I appreciate the chance to have it. So I'm Lisa Sugarman. I'm here. We were chatting a little bit before you hit record about where we all are in the world. I'm just north of Boston. That's home for me. It's been home forever. I have 2 grown daughters and been married forever to, my high school sweetheart. And I am a lot of different things that all kind of revolve around mental health and wellness. So I'm an author and a columnist and an advocate. I'm also a crisis counselor with the Trevor Project. I'm a storyteller with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'm a podcast host. I have a fairly new podcast called The Survivors that relates to a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, suicide, loss, and grief. And that's what I do. I'm a content creator in that space, just really trying to do whatever I can do that's in my power to help change that narrative for mental health and suicide and that kind of grief and loss.
So as you talk through who you are, I feel like there's lots of ways we can get into it, but I'm curious, where in the journey did you realize that you were the person to start making some of those personal connections, that you were the person that needed to be the content creator for this topic, to be the facilitator for others?
Great question. Appreciate that question, because it was definitely not a straight line for me. So as I mentioned, I've been creating some form of content for decades. That's just what I've always done. I was a newspaper reporter, wrote for magazines, and that was kind of my niche in the world. And that became a life of being kind of a parenting author and content creator. So I was very much in that lane for a very long time while my kids were young, when they were, teenagers and heading off to college. That was kind of my sweet spot. So that was the content that I created. And then I would say that's got to be about 11 years ago now. So I lost my father when I was 10 years old. I'm an only child. He passed away very, very suddenly when I was 10 years old. I was told it was a heart attack. I had no reason to disbelieve that it was a heart attack. My dad was a smoker. It ran in the family. So it was just a narrative that I accepted for what it was. And I kind of carried on with my life and did the work that I was doing and was embedded in that parenting space. And then about 11 years ago, I learned very, very accidentally that my father had actually died by suicide. And that represented the 3rd suicide loss in my lifetime. So I lost a cousin when I was 9, who ironically died the year before my father passed away. And my husband and I lost one of our closest childhood friends just 4 years ago to suicide. And kind of right in the middle, I learned about my father's. So learning that truth about my dad's death and how different the circumstances were, it did a lot of things to me. It shut me down, first and foremost. It really just, it destroyed me for a long time. It just didn't seem possible. If you knew my father, he was just this larger than life going, joyful man. And you would never think. He definitely fell into that bucket of people who you just never saw it coming. You just had no idea. And so it did kind of shut me down. I stopped writing for a long time. I really just tried to get my brain around it as best I could. And it took a few years to do that. And when I finally kind of came out of that initial place of shock, I really just didn't feel aligned anymore with what I was doing, is the simple answer to your question, Brad. I didn't feel aligned anymore with what I was doing. I felt like it was not only unusual to have 3 suicide losses in your lifetime, but it was very unusual to have lost my father twice in my lifetime and to have grieved, fully grieved his death twice. And I felt really compelled to talk about it, to share it. Didn't happen right away. It's definitely a process, but I felt really compelled to share my experience so that maybe it could shed some light on why suicide is not a selfish act, things like that, which I believed it was. My own personal belief was that it was. And it was only after learning my own father had taken his life that I realized, like, that's not true. That's not true at all. If somebody has mental illness, they want to escape their pain and they can't, and that was their only option. So there were a lot of things I felt like I needed to do with my story. So I just started putting it out there and ended up here.
Wow.
And was I was going to say, was that the beginning initially of the HelpHUB, or was that just you starting to process out with other individuals as counselors and volunteers?
It was the latter. So the HelpHUB came later. I started small. So I started first by just, of course, sharing the truth with my children, and who at the time were teens, and I felt it was very important for them to know the truth. And then it just was kind of a ripple effect. It became, the immediate family, and then everybody who was in my orbit and community. And then that became the narrative. Then that was something that everybody knew and understood to be the truth. And from there, it's funny how things happen. I was invited on a podcast. I was invited after I had mentioned for the first time publicly by making a post that I had lost my father to suicide. And it was on, I think it was International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. And I felt really compelled to write about it. I had never written about it. And it caught the eye of a podcaster. She's in Canada, and she reached out to me, and we didn't know each other. And she asked if I would come on her podcast and share my story, which I had never, ever even considered. And that really started all of it for me. I just kept talking and kept getting invited to share the story. And that kind of paved the way for slowly starting to write about it, and then starting to really try and advocate for changes in the mental health system. And I wanted to do even more. So I became a crisis counselor with the Trevor Project, which, if people are listening and you don't know what that is, it's a lifeline. It's similar to the 988 crisis lifeline, but it's specifically geared to LGBTQ youth ages 13 to 24. So that's who our primary audience is. And I just kept getting more and more involved. I got involved with the National Alliance on Mental Illness as a storyteller, and I moderate grief groups for survivors of suicide loss through Samaritans. So it just kept kind of snowballed, just kept rolling. And the HelpHUB was a result of all of those other things that I've done since.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Lisa, I'm so sorry. That's a lot of loss. And then to have to reconcile later on in life your dad's loss. So it sucks that you went through that. And I'm sorry that you did.
I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
It did suck. It continues to suck.
It still does. Yeah, it will every day.
Yeah. There are parts of it that always will. I mean, grief and joy can coexist again, but it's there. It's always there, but it just gives me an incredible amount of, I guess, satisfaction in some ways to just be able to take this really terrible thing and do something that benefits other people.
Yeah, and the fortitude to be able to sit with people in their pain that are at that moment of crisis. I mean, that's incredible that you're able to do that and just be there with them. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's get into the HelpHUB. What is it? How does it work? How did you create it?
So I just smiling whenever I talk about the HelpHUB because it's definitely been a labor of love. The HelpHUB started as just a resource page on my website. My website was like most other people's websites. It's just kind of an interactive place to showcase what you do. And so mine was called lisasugarman.com. It had a lot of my writing and content up there, and that was pretty much it. And then I started, doing all this work with all these organizations and volunteering and crisis counseling and whatnot. And as a result of that, I started to see gaps in the way that people obtain their resources. I felt like there were things that could be done better. And so I started kind of quietly accumulating just a list. The HelpHUB just started out as a gigantic, unwieldy list of organizations and crisis hotlines and platforms that people could go to if they're in crisis. And it didn't have any structure or form. It was just like this A to Z list that I just kept throwing resources onto. And it was on my website. And ultimately, it got to the point where it was so big and ridiculous that you couldn't navigate it. Like there was no way to search through it. So I had this great conversation with my daughter. My oldest is 27, and she was a communications major. And so, of course, she, gave me her, her input and said, "Why don't you break it into categories, make it a little bit more, user friendly?" So I did, and I realized in getting that feedback from her, I realized that we are all, and here's the nature of the HelpHUB. We all go through things like grief and loss, and in some cases, suicide, and that kind of nuanced grief, and depression and anxiety. Like we all go through all of these things. We just do it in a different headspace, under a different roof, and as a part of a different community. So what might help me might not help someone in the AAPI community, or someone who is a veteran, or someone in the elderly community. Like you need something a little different to suit your specific needs and community and where you come from and all that. So I started thinking about these categories in that context of like, okay, like what does somebody in the BIPOC community need? And it's a very specific kind of resource. So I started organizing everything in that way. And I came up with 16 different categories. And so, some of them are mindfulness categories, online mental health services, crisis support services. But then there are also a lot of these unique pockets for different communities. And I broke it apart that way. And again, it kind of lived in the back end of my website. And then I just realized the more work I started doing on this, I realized like, this is my website. Like this is, if I'm really out here trying to be of service and I'm really out here trying to help make an impact for people, my content, while it might be valuable in some ways, is not more valuable than the resource that someone who's in a toxic headspace needs at that time. So I just kind of ripped everything down to the very bare bones, and I rebuilt my website, and I made the actual, if you go on the website, if you go to the helphub.co, the very first thing pretty much that you see is this grid. It's designed to be very user-friendly. It's just little thumbnails in a grid, and they are categorized, and you can go to grief and loss resources and click that and get all the grief and loss resources you need. Or you can go to the Latinx button and you get resources specific to the Latinx community and so on. So that just kind of overtook everything. And then I just added in my content that I had been creating in the form of like short videos and toolkits and columns and articles. I just added that as supporting material, but it was the hub that really kind of overtook everything. And then I created a YouTube channel and was doing a lot of short form videos talking about different things like grief attacks, or what do you say to someone who's feeling suicidal, or why should we stop saying committed suicide, things like that. And so I really
Thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. That's a big one.
Drives me nuts.
Yeah, it drives me nuts too. I get like a visceral reaction to that now. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's the essence of the HelpHUB. I'm absolutely blown away at how many of the larger, more established mental health organizations have endorsed it and have supported it. I've got incredible partnerships now with organizations like Calmary and BetterHelp and Talkspace, and we're all working together toward the same thing. So now my podcast, The Survivors, filters into the HelpHUB. It has its own YouTube channel. There's a whole toolkit section with downloadable, shareable infographics and resources and tools. So it's become something. It's become something pretty special, and I continue to add to it constantly whenever people put resources on my radar. And, I'm fortunate. I get a lot of feedback from a lot of people who have found it and who have found it helpful. And in some cases, it's made a big difference in their life. So I'm just grateful to have opportunities like this just to talk about it, let people know that it's out there.
I'm sure at some point you were the main resource and people were always contacting you. That's an assumption I'm having. You're nodding, so I'm going for that.
Yep.
When did that really change in the formation of the website, or even in your journey from there to when, or has it? Are you still pulled in as like, Lisa, we need to know what to do? Like, are you still the central hub of redirection, or has it become where it's taken the life that it needs to?
I think it's a little bit of both. I really do. I mean, I definitely get a lot of people kind of sliding into my DMs or reaching out to me directly. There's a contact me page through the HelpHUB, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me through that or through various social platforms who have asked me directly, how do I handle this situation? How do I handle that situation? And in a lot of cases, like, I really love to have those personal conversations. I really do field them all. I really do engage with everybody who kind of, comes across my desktop and try to have those conversations. And I also do my best to point people in the right direction in terms of the HelpHUB. So I think it's like a good blend of both of those things. I think I've really tried to encourage people to really utilize the HelpHUB, not because I want to step back, but only because it's a good sign of growth when, my email inbox is filled with people who want to reach out directly. I love that, and it's beautiful. It's not always sustainable, but I get through them. I get through and reach out to everybody who reaches out to me. But yeah, I mean, right now I would say it's kind of 50-50, and I would love to see the HelpHUB continue to become that place where people can go to get what they need.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the natural growth process too. It is fantastic that you're so willing to share that much of yourself to do that for others. Uh, but in that process, I'm curious, have you been able to track the impact either like have HelpHUB has had either from like a numbers area or a region? I mean, I know you've got a lot of partner networks in there. How has that gone for you to understand what's impacting people where and how?
So I am not an analytics girl. I'm not a numbers girl. I try really, really hard because I know that that's important in terms of, understanding your growth and patterns and things like that. But I'm so not that side of my brain. So, uh, you know, I do track basic analytics. I see, for instance, I've been a little obsessed, probably too much so, with the growth of our podcast and who's listening. And it's almost in every state in the U.S. now that in 10 weeks of being out there, people in almost every state in the US are listening, and, a dozen countries, and, we're getting tons of feedback. So I can see those kinds of analytics, and I get that kind of feedback more directly, I think.
Mm.
But in terms of the HelpHUB itself, I mean, it's hard for me to quantify things like that right now. I mean, I am a kind of a one woman show, and I guess the only way that I can see the measurable impact is when people reach out to me. People say, I learned about the 90-day lifeline from your website, or from a video I saw of yours, or from an article that you wrote, and I gave it to a family member who was struggling, and they're not struggling anymore. I mean, that's to me, that's how I'm measuring things right now. I'm sure that there is a much more efficient way of doing it than I have the capacity to do. But that's really how I'm kind of keeping track of growth right now. I mean, everything is so organic, Brett. It's like I never had the intention of doing any of this. So the way that it's been put together, the way that it continues to grow, the partnership development has all just kind of churned because it's been whatever the decision I've made in the moment has been, and the direction that I thought I needed to go in. So if you have any help that you want to give me in regard to all that, please, I'm open.
Google Analytics is your friend.
Okay,
We
got
can
it.
we can talk about that offline. Super easy to run.
Yeah.
Um, Also, I would suspect that some of your biggest success stories you never hear about. That
Mhm.
person that's in that vulnerable crisis moment, they go to your website, they find something that speaks to their soul, and they make a decision that changes their life, or they call one of the help, and you never know. And we'll never have numbers to track that, but
Yeah. Yeah. I hope there's a ton of that. I hope that there is. I mean, I know just by virtue of the messages that I do get, people who do find me to say that was beneficial, or I didn't know this resource was out there, or thank you for putting me in a different direction. Like, I get those things, and those things mean everything. But yeah, I hope it's happening a ton.
yeah.
I really do.
Definitely. Which leads beautifully into legacy. So you've done a ton of work in a pretty short amount of time. What How do you create a legacy that outlasts the work that you've done?
I think it's Honestly, I think it's by saving the people who were in jeopardy of not being here, who were in jeopardy of making decisions that would change their lives and change the lives of their people. I think that's the legacy. I mean, I laugh because, when I think legacy, I automatically my mind goes to my daughters. And there's so much out in the world of the content that I've created over the decades. And we all laugh because my kids never read a thing that I write ever. They're like, "Why would I need to read anything that you write? I live it. We live it. We hear it every day." So when I think legacy, that's the first thing that pops into my mind. But then you're making me think beyond that, which I appreciate. I think to me, it's that. It's knowing that, long after I'm gone, hopefully someday, there will be people who will be here because of the work that I've done, who may not have been. And to me, like, that's the end game for me. I mean, I remember when I told my family that I wanted to become a crisis counselor. Now, keep in mind, and this is valuable backstory, I am an unbelievable empath. That's how I'm
Oh,
wired. I'm wired that way.
oh,
I feel everything, Amanda. I feel all of your good, all of your bad, everything around me. And I internalize that a lot. And they were like,
yeah.
"How in the hell are you going to be on a crisis lifeline when you're out there crying at like Pampers commercials and cute puppy videos? Like, how can you do that?" And I said, I don't know. I don't know, but I believe it's what I need to do. And I can make you the promise that if I get there and I go through the training and I'm on lifelines and I find like, okay, this is too much. I can't do this. It's too triggering. It's too overwhelming. I won't. I'll find another way to help. And it just so happened that I guess it's what I'm supposed to do because I have been able to, I don't know if it's compartmentalize or not. Maybe it is in part, but I've been able to show up in the ways that I need to and the ways that other people have needed me to. And I'm grateful for that. And, and I just keep rolling with it. But my mother said, if you save one person, one single person, anything that you've done would be worth it. And the irony was, we go through a really rigorous training protocol to become a lifeline counselor anywhere, but Trevor,
I bet. Yeah.
especially, yeah. So I'm a certified 988 crisis counselor, and then I'm also certified as a Trevor Project licensed counselor. And the very first day after all this training, months and months and months of training and all these role plays and everything, and you're shadowed on the lines, but you've got your supervisor is there. All of a sudden, day one, I'm on a lifeline by myself, take my first call. It's an imminent risk in process suicide
Oh,
attempt. And it was 3.5 hours long, somewhere between
gosh.
3.5 hours long. And you're in it. Like you're in it from beginning to end with obviously the goal of de-escalating and safety planning and getting that person to a place of stability. And that ultimately is what happened. And I remember getting off and just getting off that shift and grabbing the phone and calling my mom and just saying, like, just tears, like everything just came out.
Right?
And because that last thing the person said to me, once like they were stable, we had a plan in place, they were grateful. They said, "Thank God it was you. Thank God it was you. If you hadn't been the one to pick up the phone," which of course is probably not true. It would have everybody on the lifeline is amazing. But because they had spent so much time with me, they, said me. And that just, it wrecked me in all the most beautiful
Mm,
ways. Like it just,
mhm.
I said, "Mom, that was the person.
Yeah.
There it was."
Right. Do you feel like a connection with them? I mean, I'm sure you probably can't, but do you wanna, like, ping them in 2 days and make sure they're okay?
Oh yeah, everybody. I want to like have everybody over for dinner and just like, just, you know, give everybody, hugs. Yeah, that's a hard thing for me. Part of that, I mean, I've learned that in a lot of cases, you just don't know what's going to happen after. You may get to a point where you have either had to create an intervention plan or you've created a safety plan and the person is checking off all the boxes saying that they're good, but, could be a person who has a history of attempts, who's had ideation for a long time. And like when you hang up the phone, you kind of don't know.
Mhm.
And I don't really dwell on it. I
Yeah.
can't because I'd go crazy if I did.
Right.
You can only do what you can do in the moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So, Lisa, what's next for you?
Well, I don't know. In a lot of ways, I don't know. In some ways, I do. I have a book coming out, another book coming out. It's very, very different than anything that I've written before because everything else that I've done focused on raising kids and work-life balance and the parenting space. And I'm actually, my deadline is coming up. My editor and I have been working like crazy for the last several months. My manuscript is in my publisher's hands. We've been editing furiously, and it will be probably advanced copies will be coming out this winter. And it's a lot of things. It's predominantly a memoir, and it's about losing my dad twice. But it also really is something that's going to distill down the HelpHUB. I want to make sure that when someone's reading this book about suicide and loss and this kind of grief and shame and stigma and all of the things attached, like I want someone to read it and actually have the help they need right there with them, or the help someone else needs. So I'm working to add the HelpHUB in and all of the tools from the toolkit section of the HelpHUB so that it's really kind of a complete body of work. You can hear the story, connect with what I've gone through, and then you can also, if it resonates, if it hits a connection point, people can find maybe the help that they need if they're needing help, and if they know somebody else who is. So that will be everywhere. So by next spring.
Very cool.
Yeah. And beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I'm very, very excited to grow this podcast. Podcast I have is called The Survivors, and I have a co-host who already has a very, very successful podcast out in the world called Shit That Goes On in Our Heads. It's a mental health related podcast, and she is a survivor of a suicide attempt, and I am a survivor of multiple suicide losses, and we're both advocates. And so together we have a really, really unique perspective, and we just get on and talk about all the things that are related to the thing that nobody's supposed to talk about, that we've been told we shouldn't talk about. So we're having all the conversations about every aspect of suicide and attempts and loss and grieving and mental health and wellness. And so I'm really excited to grow that this year and beyond.
Yeah, as you should be. I mean, that's the current in the day work. So working on that. As you go through all of this, I mean, I'm sure you're drawing some form of inspiration from others. Are there specific organizations that you've found really inspiring to you, or that you aspire to pattern part of your work after?
I think for me right now, the love of my life, aside from the HelpHUB, is the Trevor Project. I'm just so consistently inspired by everything that the Trevor Project is doing in the world, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are helped by their work, the way in which they show up in the world, the way that they've supported me as a counselor. And, it's not just, they're not just a crisis lifeline. Even if they were just a crisis lifeline, that would be enough, but they're not. They're just such an incredible hub of knowledge and experience and resources. And there's kind of an internal Trevor space component where it's a protected and safe online networking site for LGBTQ youth to connect. Like if you're struggling with coming out and you've talked to one of us about it, a counselor about it, but you kind of want to have a little bit of peer support, they offer a place where you can go and connect with any number of people who might be going through the same thing. So I'm so inspired by them and what they do. And so, yeah, that they would be the one, they would be the biggest one. But there are so many other organizations out there, like Samaritans, for instance, or National Alliance on Mental Illness, or the Same Here Global Healthcare Movement, or grassroots suicide prevention in the UK. Like all of these organizations, we're all working toward the same thing. Everybody kind of has their own little spin. So I think I take a little something from everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful too. And I'm I keep thinking back to the words you said early on during the training, like how good the training was. And I'm starting to get a little pissed that I was put in those situations with, ahead of youth without any training, and, lived side by side with, others struggling and had no training from that. And I'm so grateful that it exists today. So,
Yeah. I know, right?
Thank
Yeah.
God.
I mean, when I think, you look at
Mhm.
some of the statistics that, every once in a while, or at least every year, Trevor will kind of do a recap of how many calls they've taken and how many interventions and, kind of distilling down all of their kind of facts at a glance. And it's staggering, staggering in both a good and a bad way, staggering that there's so many people out there in the world who need help, but amazing that we're providing these resources. And I just think like about myself as a human being who has undergone this kind of training. It has completely changed the way that I show up for people, the way that I hold space for people, the way that I validate people. There are certain things that I've now learned are so important in a conversation in terms of like maintaining somebody's agency, for instance, when they're the ones struggling and they're calling for help and all you want to do as a friend or a counselor or someone in a position of help is just to kind of bombard someone like it's going to be okay and give the anecdotes and I went through this and I'm taught not to do that. We're not allowed to do that. And I couldn't see the wisdom in that initially until I spent time on the lifelines and realized like, oh, okay. It's because that call can't be about me or whether I'm queer or whether I'm married or where I live in the world or what my real name is. It needs to be 100% about the human being who's calling me. And it changed everything for me. So yeah, we're lucky that we have these platforms in the world because, it's saving people's lives, like, end of story, hard stop. It's saving people's lives.
Yeah, but it is great that we're to a point where we've, 1, recognized it, 2, come alongside it, and 3, provided for others. So with that, what are the things that we can do or that you would suggest for us to all become better equipped to learn more and to be able to either redirect at the right time or to just be able to be in the moment without being a deterrent? I mean, deterrent for bad things, but without, how do we be the person? How do we be part of the journey and not a
I
problem?
think a lot of that starts with how we show up as an ally. I think that we have to approach it when we're talking about how do you show up for people who need help. It's not my job, and now I'm speaking as a crisis counselor. It's not my job. It's not a therapist's job. It's not a friend's job to show up and fix the problem. I think that, first and foremost, is the thing that people have to internalize before they even open their mouth and start talking to somebody who's not okay. We have to recognize that as badly as we want to, and every single one of us wants to fix the problem and heal the person and all those things, but that's not our job. What our job is to hold space, is to be a resource, is to approach every single conversation with every single person who might be struggling with an open mind, non-judgmentally, and just be a good, active listener. Like that's what we have to be doing. And we have to take people at face value because what might send me over the edge, Amanda, you might be like, what's that such a big deal about? That's not a big deal. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's all relative. What might be a huge deal for me is nothing to you, and vice versa. And so we have to just validate everybody's experience. It's their experience. No matter how it sounds to you, that doesn't matter. So those are some of the things you can do kind of from the jump right away. And then I think the other thing that we can do to just kind of arm ourselves, I know the other thing we can do is to arm ourselves with the resources to take us to the next step as helpers, to take someone who's struggling to the next step as someone who's struggling. Keep the 988 crisis and suicide lifeline number active in your brain. Tell people about it, understand how to access it, know what it is, know how it helps, know how it works, and make sure that if somebody you know is not okay, and maybe that person doesn't have a community, maybe they don't have a partner or a family or, a group to support them. No one in this world is actually alone as long as resources like the Trevor Project or Samaritans or NAMI or Trevor Project or the crisis text line exist because there is always somebody there who is trained to de-escalate, come up with a safety plan, listen, offer resources. So those are the things that I would say we can all be doing to ensure that we're showing up in the best possible way to the people who need us when they need us most.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? Sorry, Brett, I can tell you want to move on.
Yeah.
But Lisa,
No,
I've
please.
always read that talking about suicide, asking, especially somebody that you know has ideations, checking in on them, asking them how they're doing, everything I've read indicates that nothing about talking about suicide or any of that plants the seed. None of it increases the ideations. Is there anything, or one, is that true? And then two, is there anything that is really important to avoid in that language as you're trying to get somebody over to a crisis counselor?
So first of all, yes, that is 100% accurate, true. It seems kind of counterintuitive. I know to a lot of people it seems counterintuitive. And as somebody, again, who is taking these lifeline calls, who is doing these risk assessments, which we do on a lifeline call within the first 5 minutes to find out, like, okay, where is this person at? Are they, are they just having a bad day, or are they about to try and take their life? Like, where are they at? We have to ask those questions exactly the way that we do. And the way that we do is to say to someone, are you thinking of killing yourself? And depending on how they answer yes or no, it's the old decision tree. If it's a yes, we say, well, have you done anything today to try and harm or kill yourself? And then if they say yes again, it's what did you do? Where are the means? What is your timeline? And then you just kind of go through that decision tree. But the reason why, and it's been proven time and time and time again, there's so many articles and studies that have proven that when you use that direct language, it not only is not a threat of making the situation worse, it's not going to push the person to do the thing. It's actually got the opposite effect. It's actually, if anything, going to reduce the likelihood of that person harming or killing themselves. Because when you acknowledge it and you say, okay, like, are you trying to kill yourself, or do you want to end your life? That person, right in that instant, that person knows that you're legit. They know that you're helping them, that you're there to support them, that you're a safe space, that you're taking them seriously, that you're validating them. And those things matter. And that's why, if anything, it reduces the likelihood that someone will harm themselves, because the person now sees you as an ally and as a support. So that's the answer to that question. And as far as the second question, what kind of to avoid saying? I mean, I think there's a lot of language that people can avoid using. I think one of the biggest things, don't tell someone it's not a big deal, but you'll get over it. It's going to be fine.
Right, because it's probably not going to be fine.
No, it's not going to be fine. Now, that's not to say that you will always feel the way that you feel right now when you're in the thick of it, when you're dysregulated and having, like, maybe even ideation or depression, or that's not to say that you can't get to the other side of it. But right then and there, by saying, like, it's really that bad. It's not that bad. Get over it, move on, suck it up, tough it out. Like, do not use that language with someone who is in crisis like that, because that is hugely invalidating.
And I'm really glad you interrupted for that, because I think it was gold to have all that.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you for, being open, transparent, subjecting yourself to a change in life and adjusting your life to meet your calling. And I'm sorry your calling had to go through that kind of metamorphosis to come out, but I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you're doing this, and we'll all check out the HelpHUB and, look forward to following you and the new podcast and the book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you both so much for such intentional questions that I think are important for people to hear. There's an awful lot out there in the world that's wrecking people's mental health. So, the more we can have these kinds of conversations, the better. And I appreciate both of you for having it.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this incredibly moving and important conversation with Lisa Sugarman. Her willingness to share such personal grief, growth, and purpose is exactly the kind of impact we want to highlight here on Generous Impact. If Lisa's story resonated with you, we encourage you to learn more about the HelpHUB and the incredible work she's doing to support mental health, suicide prevention, and survivor communities. And remember, you are not alone. As always, thank you for listening.